The idea of today's presentation was maybe to tell you a little bit, as I said, about my journey from the lab now to the world of scholarly publishing. So I want to highlight particularly today one specific journal, ACS Materials Letters, but please feel free to ask any questions in general about the scholarly publishing process or any of the other journals. So I'm going to be speaking a little bit about my path, as I said. So I was originally a computational chemist in Venezuela, in the very north of South America, a country that is rich in oil, but unfortunately due to political and economic uncertainty, it's right now in a pretty bad shape. But all this to say that, you know, I started my undergrad in chemistry there. I spent 5 years doing research in computational chemistry, and then, you know, eventually made it all the way now to the American Chemical Society. So went from being a computational chemist, then during my PhD, I became an spectroscopy doing mostly nonlinear optics. And then eventually also during my postdoc, I was doing ultra-fast spectroscopy, this time in the gas phase. So I have been pretty much all over the place, from theory to condensed phase to gas phase. And yeah, as I said, I eventually then became a managing editor at ACS Publications, and more recently a senior managing editor. So I'm also going to be spending quite a little bit of time navigating through the scientific publishing, and this is something that probably all of you are familiar with, but just a few reminders of how the process works. So before I get started, I would like to just share a few words about, you know, the American Chemical Society. So who we are. Basically, the American Chemical Society is the largest professional society around the world, with nearly 160,000 members. And basically, our vision is to advance the broader chemistry enterprise and its practitioners. Now, just a couple of words that I want to highlight here. The fact that we have American as part of the title, right? It's something that comes from more than 100 years since its foundation. But I want to stress the fact that ACS is a very global society. You know, our authorship, readership, our members are really all over the world. So don't think of us as necessarily being, you know, US centric. We are indeed a very global society. And on top of that, the fact that it's chemical is not a reason to limit the reach of the society. Within ACS publication, we have publications that are related to biology, related to medicinal chemistry, some other journals that are more related to physics. And the idea is basically to cater to the needs of the community in general. So all this to say that American and chemical are not necessarily limitations in what we want to do across the world. And how does ACS fulfill this mission? Well, we have several ways, right? In particularly in my division, ACS Publication, the idea is to communicate your discoveries and learn about others, right? So we have several, more than 50 ACS journals that become a trusted forum for, you know, publish your work and adjudicate your research through peer review, and it's widely disseminated to the world. And the idea is to, you know, publish always the best science and to support your knowledge and discoveries. Another way we have to fulfill this mission of the ACS is through keeping the community in general with the latest developments from industry, government, and professional news. And we accomplish that through our magazine, Chemical and Engineering News. In addition to that, we also have Chemical Abstracts service, which help researchers to find, plan, and strategize. And basically, it's a tool that allows researchers to, you know, organize their publication library. It allows them to also look for new scientific content, and is basically, so Chemical Abstract Service is the one responsible for indexing every new substance that is developed in the lab. So basically, it's a very, very powerful tool to stay on top of the latest cutting edge research. We also have a membership division, and basically the idea is to, you know, work one-on-one with each of our members and help make sure that we help them navigate every stage of their career. So as a whole, the society would like to provide, you know, the community with opportunities to network and engage at the local level, but also at the world stage. So we have grants and awards and in international research collaboration. So basically every ACS member always has the exposure to a broad network of peers from around the world. So in summary, right, the idea is to discover the best in science, to advance your career and connect with peers and basically share our common passion for science. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time in terms of, you know, again, these are reminders. All of you are probably aware of what the publishing process, how it works, but it is important to kind of know that how everything works internally, and this is where it is important to draw a comparison, right, where we are in terms of scientific publishing that has certainly undergone a revolution. This is probably before my time, but many of you may remember that in order to submit your manuscript, you actually had to mail a copy to the journal. You know, there were actual sort of records of reviewers, and there was actual typesetting, and those were the days where the journals were printed, right? So the publishing time was sort of a little bit longer because you would send the printed version of your manuscript to the journal. You will get comments back from the reviewers, actually handwritten on your paper. So the process took a while, this back and forth. And this is where we are right now, right? Everything is online. You have article templates. There is an online submission and review system. In many cases, you can actually track where your paper is right from your cell phone. So it's basically everything is moving a lot faster, and the process per se is slightly easier to navigate. So many factors come into play when you choose a journal, right, to publish your work. And I could go down the list one by one, but I don't think it's sort of the scope of this presentation. But you probably identify things that will probably resonate with you and are many of the criteria that you use when selecting a journal to publish your work, right? But the most important questions you may ask yourself is, who's the audience and does it fit the scope of the journal? And really, it boils down to what is the impact of your work, right? Many of these metrics on the left are useful criteria when selecting a journal for your publication, but in terms of what is the appropriate audience for your work, I guess these are some of the key relevant questions that you have to put, that you have to answer yourself before submitting your work. So all of you are, again, familiar with the publication process, but let me a little bit walk you through what it is, right? So the different stages, everything starts at the very top when you are doing the work in your lab. You have all the results together, you have put together the paper, and then it eventually comes to the fact of, okay, it is time to submit your paper to a specific journal, right? And there is that step in between writing the papers and submitting it to an actual journal where preprint servers can sort of come and play a big role. And I'm gonna speak a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But you know, basically this is how the process works. Paper gets submitted to the journal. There is some standard, you know, checks that needs to be made in the manuscript. It goes to an editor-in-chief, or at least, let me clarify this, at least this is the process that is implemented at ACS Publications. Every publisher may have a little bit of a variation, and it's pretty much gonna depend on if you're dealing with staff editors, that is, editors that make decisions on your papers and that work for that specific publisher. In the case of ACS Publication, every editorial decision is made by practicing scientists. So here, the figure of an editor-in-chief and an associate editor, those are your peers. Basically, we as ACS staff will not have a say as to whether your paper is accepted or not. Once the paper goes through peer review, then it follows the standard process, possible revisions or resubmissions, and in some cases, the paper is not deemed appropriate for publication, in which case it's eventually declined. So starting early in 2018, ACS Publications sort of developed this review-ready submission format. And basically the idea is to minimize the burden on our authors. We've all experienced that frustration, right? You put the paper in one specific format for one specific journal, and even within the same publisher, say for example, ACS, if the paper, for example, doesn't make it to the first journal, then I'm sure you would like to move forward and get it submitted to another journal. If it is sometimes within ACS, you were going to run into the situation that probably you had to change the format again. So we developed this review-ready submission template that has just the minimum requirements in order to make it through peer review. Again, as I said, the first step is once the paper is submitted to each journal, it goes through certain administrative checks, and we have to make sure that, you know, all the authors are properly listed, that we have their email addresses correct, that there is a cover letter, of course, and if there is any conflict of interest statement, that, you know, that everything is where it should be. And for certain journals that kind of require, that are kind of heavy in terms of data, think about, you know, NMR data, mass spectrometry data, elemental analysis, crystallographic files, we have to look for all those formatting information before we can proceed with peer review. But basically then the paper comes to an editor-in-chief, right? As I said, this is a practicing scientist. This is someone who runs a laboratory. So understand pretty much what it's like to be an author. This editor-in-chief gets, you know, papers submitted and rejected, same as every author. Basically the responsibility of the editor-in-chief is to first receive that paper and make an assessment as to whether or not the paper fits the scope of the journal. And it also provides an assessment as to whether or not it has the right impact in terms of what the journal is looking for. So pretty much in a nutshell, what the editor-in-chief does is to commission content, set the journal vision, recruit editors, pretty much very overall strategic development of the journal. Then eventually, if the paper is considered appropriate for, it fits the scope of the journal, then the paper gets assigned to an associate editor. And basically the role of this person is to evaluate the significant and perceived novelty of the journal. So the ultimate decision on every manuscript comes from an associate editor. And this person then rely on peer reviewers to inform the decision as to whether the paper is accepted or not, right? So basically, here's 4 steps that every associate editor goes through. Step number 1, the paper is read and examined and makes an initial decision as to whether send the paper out for review or not. Then once the reviews come back, analyzes each report independently, and as an expert in that specific area, it doesn't necessarily, follow verbatim what the reviewers are saying. Again, the reviewers are lending their expertise and making an assessment, but at the end, also the expertise of the associate editor comes into play when making the decision, and it eventually then provides a decision to the author. Everyone is well aware also of the role of peer reviewers. So basically the idea is to reach out to a pool of experts, and in some cases, authors are also able to recommend some reviewers, right? So some typical things that you should avoid in suggesting friends or current collaborators or anyone with a conflict of interest, right? But in an ideal world, the reviewer, it's someone with the technical expertise to evaluate the scientific validity of the paper, and then eventually offer a constructive and fair assessment of to the associate editor. And so I would like to take this opportunity to make a plug for one sort of educational tool that is available to you, developed by ACS. Is called ACS Reviewer Lab. And it's basically, no one, as scientists, we're not trained to go and sort of do the peer review process, right? We become, as we go through grad school, postdoc, and then eventually as faculty members at different universities, we're just assigned a paper to peer review. And it's good to sort of take the time to be properly trained in the process. So this particular tool has 6 different modules that it takes about 4 hours, and it has video, infographics, and some assessments at the end. And it basically, once you graduate, quote unquote, from the course, then you are automatically added to the reviewer pool of ACS journals. So it's a very powerful tool. I will encourage all of you, if you have not done it, to take the time and do it. So one possible way, say, if the paper is not accepted in the original journal that you selected, there is the possibility of manuscript transfer. And the idea is basically to make it easy on you to still publish with ACS, right? And many publishers and many journals have also implemented this process. So if by any chance your first choice didn't quite make it there, the idea is for you to still stay within the ACS family. So basically, editors consult between one another and basically say, we will offer you this transfer so that you can go to Journal B within the ACS portfolio. In general, one of the last steps, assuming the paper has been accepted, then it comes to our production office. And They typically handle everything quite fast. You can get the proofs of your papers within 5 or 6 days from acceptance. And in general, in 2017, the ACS portfolio average from submission to the paper being online is about 11 weeks. Authors have the opportunity. We have developed our own technology. So instead of providing a list of corrections via an email, you can sort of suggest the changes directly in a tool developed by ACS. We have developed many resources on how to help authors with many of these steps that I have already described, and these videos are available on YouTube. Maybe just go to YouTube and and type ACS Author University, and you're going to find more than 20 videos with sort of tips and tricks on how to get your paper published. And here's a little bit more of the same. I said that I was going to talk a little bit about preprints, right? And about 3-4 years ago, ACS developed ChemArchive, now in partnership with the Royal Society of Chemistry, also the German Chemical Society, the Chinese Chemical Society. I believe the Japanese Chemical Society is also supporting this. So it's basically to offer the authors the possibility to publish their research as a preprint prior to submitting it to any journal, right? These ChemArchives is not only meant for papers that are going to be eventually submitted to ACS, but it is a service that is available to the entire community. I'm gonna pause there for 1 second, Alexei. I could continue, or maybe, I don't know if people have specific questions about this part of the presentation.
So according to our experience, I think the best is to shift all the questions at the end.
Okay.
I also have several, but I would like to continue hearing you.
Okay, perfect. So let me continue then. I'm going to spend then the rest of my presentation really talking about one of the newest journals in the portfolio, ACS Materials Letters, a journal that I helped create from the very beginning, and something that I'm really proud of, and you may not be as familiar with. As I said, ACS Materials Letters was officially launched last year in 2019, and here is a picture of the entire editorial team. So the deputy editor is Professor Bin Liu at the National University of Singapore. The rest of the editorial team is spread throughout the world. We have Osman Bakr at the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia. We have Professor Sharon Chen at the Nanyang Technological University, also in Singapore. And 2 of our editors, Will Dichtel and Wei Hua Yu, are both based here in the US. And here's just a brief list of our current editorial advisory board. And before, sort of dwelling a little bit more into the details of ACS Materials Letters, I wanted to provide a brief sort of timeline of where the journal was and when we're headed. So the journal was originally launched in January 29, 2019, pretty much, towards the end of January. We had the first paper online published in March 2022. So it took a few weeks to get that first paper through peer review, and the first issue in July 2019. So we're very proud that basically the journal is currently celebrating its first anniversary from that first issue back in last year. And we are now indexed in Web of Science in March 2020. So as you are probably all aware, this is Web of Science and Clarivate. They're the one responsible for generating impact factors for the journal. So it is always very, very important for every journal to be indexed in Web of Science, because not only because of impact factor, but it does help also with discoverability. You want to make sure that everyone find your research readily available. So what were the initial goals, and what are the current goals of ACS Materials Letters? So we want to publish the highest quality and urgent contributions to material science, seeking for content in multidisciplinary and innovative materials research, basically materials research that is translational and that can address global challenges like energy, sustainability, security, and one of the goals really in order to make it appealing to the community was to establish a journal with very fast processing time. As you may recall from earlier slides, the average of the entire portfolio, the 60+ journals, from submission to acceptance is about 11 weeks. And right now, ACS Materials Letters has, from submission to acceptance, about 7 weeks. And this is something that every time we're tweaking the process so that we can shorten that processing time. And one added benefit to authors is that there is immediate pagination upon acceptance. Basically, the article becomes fully citable and has pages assigned to it as soon as it hits the web. So we really encourage everyone to take a look and give it a consideration when submitting your work. We have done many events and initiatives to make the community aware of the new journal. Back in 2019, as we were launching the journal, we embarked on a summit series, and we visited 6 universities in China just to raise awareness of the journal. And here are sort of a few pictures of those events. In the very first picture in the top left, you can see the deputy editor, Professor Bin Lu, introducing the journal to the audience. Fast forward then a year after that, and in 2020, as I said, we're proud of be celebrating the first year anniversary of the journal. We just did a webinar about 2 weeks ago, was attended. It was because of time zone differences. It was mainly geared towards the Asian audience, and we had 4 fantastic and outstanding material scientists, one of them being Kostya Novoselov, which, as many of you are aware, it's one of the Nobel Prize winners due to the discovery of graphene. We have also developed some virtual issues. For example, one of them is the 20th anniversary of aggregation-induced emission. And basically, this was just an effort to start collaborating with other ACS journals in this very specific topic. We have also developed many flavors of manuscript types that we want our authors to consider. So you have the standard letter. This is fundamental research in a letter format. We have your standard reviews, perspective, and viewpoints. There is always a little bit of a confusion about reviews and perspectives. So review is a very thorough and in-depth account of the literature in one specific topic. Perspective tends to be slightly shorter and not a full account of the latest research for one specific topic, and it always has a little bit of a forward-looking flavor to it. You might say even a little bit of a speculation. So the author kind of puts his or her views on where he or she think the field is headed. And one particular format that we're very excited about is Materials Expressed. Actually, what you're seeing here is our very first Materials Expressed, published just a few weeks ago. Materials Expressed is meant to be really short, about 1,000 words. And if you want to get a sense of what that looks like in terms of a paper format, 1,000 words is about 1 to 2 formatted pages. It only includes a maximum of 2 figures and no more than 15 references. So the idea here is to really, really streamline those results that you really think are going to have a high impact and provide authors with a venue to be short and sweet is a very, very common expression here in the United States. Short and sweet and with a relatively high impact. We also have a very strong presence in social media. Among some of those is, for example, Twitter. We have a very active Twitter account, as you can see here on the left. And then because we know we want to give the authors the added exposure to some of the I guess less known or less accessible social media channels, especially in Asia. You might have heard of WeChat. It's a very powerful tool, especially among Chinese authors. And in the middle figure, you see an example on how these papers are being promoted. And typically these are highly read, and basically your research is being now exposed to a much broader audience in their native language. XMOL is another platform that is widely read by Chinese scientists, and here is another example on how we are promoting our content in that platform. And because probably you might be missing some of our regular correspondence and updates, I will encourage everyone to take the time to visit our publishing center, and you can pretty much select to receive updates from the journal. As you can see here in the middle, you can get journals update and get an email every time that an issue is published. And you can select, as you can see in the bottom, daily, weekly, monthly. So it's a very powerful way to pretty much stay in touch with the journal on a regular basis and be aware of the initiatives that are currently in place. That's basically all I had. I probably brushed on many of the topics probably too quickly, but I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'm probably then